This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We continue in the Iggeres HaGra. We've basically just started the Sefer, and the Ramban begins, and we mentioned from Reb Chaim Vital the idea that the concept of Midos Toivos are so fundamental that ultimately they bring to the highest paths in Ruchnios, namely Ruach HaKodesh and Hashras HaShechina. And the projection and trajectory of the Iggeres Ramban is such that the Ramban does not really mention the performance of any mitzvahs in his aliyah, and his climb, and his ascent to Ruach HaKodesh, and it's all based on Midos Toivos, which he begins with the recommendation to snaheg tamid, one should accustom themselves always. Ledaber kol dvarecha benachas, to speak all of their words benachas. I'm not going to translate the word benachas yet. One would think the word benachas would mean gently or peacefully. L'chol adam, to every person, uv'chol eis, and at all times, uv'zet hinatzel menakas. And by training oneself to speak gently, one saves themselves and spares themselves from anger. Now, the Gemara in Yuma says on Daf Pevav, on the pasuk v'yahavtas Hashem leikecha, that one should try to engender that Hashem's name is loved through you, and that is when one learns Torah and serves Talmidei Chachamim and deals honestly in business, and he speaks benachas im habriyos, people say about him, Ashrei Aviv Shalimdoi Torah, Ashrei Rabbi Shalimdoi Torah. Now, in order for a person to be in the habit of always speaking benachas, one has to acquire the following character trait, and that is the character trait of menucha, yishuv hadas, not to be shaken up, so to speak. Not, for a person to have a certain peace of mind, for a person to have a certain equanimity, that they don't get rattled. And that is called menucha. And someone who has menucha or equanimity is not easily shaken up, is not equally rattled. Rav Goldberg quotes Rav Simcha Zisel of Kelm, that he says, if only, he says, miyitain v'nisragel b'midas hasaval, if only we can accustom ourselves in the midah of equanimity, of tolerance, savlanut, of being tolerant. Kizeh shoyresh kol hamidos, that is the root of all character traits. V'hamenucha, and equanimity. V'shoyresh kol hamalos, it's the root of all good qualities. So here Reb Simcha Zisel is saying a very big chiddush, that the root of all character traits and good midos, it's all mushrush, it's all rooted in the midah of menucha, of savlanos, of tolerance. So that seems to be the primary character trait that Reb Simcha Zisel emphasizes. It's interesting, the Chavos HaVavos writes that one of the three main missions of a person in this world is to become a savlan, a tolerant person, kemalachim hasavlanim, like the tolerant angels. In fact, Rav Goldberg quotes Rashi in Parshas Behaloischa, on the pasuk v'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od. Moshe was very humble. Rashi says shafal v'savlan, humble and tolerant. A detail, a component of anivos is savlanos, and therefore, at the beginning of one's quest to acquire midos toivos, one has to accustom themselves in the midah of savlanos and to speak benachas, and by doing so, they will save themselves from kas, and ultimately they will reach the madrega of anivos. Now the Ramban says one should accustom themselves to speak benachas, l'chol adam, to every person. That means even to someone who caused you pain, even to someone who insulted you, even someone who stepped on your toe. You should answer them, speak to them benachas. Now, there are many people who are very tolerant. Once they step outside of the doorway of their home, they're very tolerant in shul, or in yeshiva, or at work, or in the store. But at home, they become very intolerant of their family, of their wives, of their children. And therefore the Ramban says, L'chol Adam, every person, train yourself to speak benachas to every person. Rav Goldberg also cites the Sifsei Chachamim Parshas Behaloischa, when Hashem got angry at Aaron and Miriam, He says to them, Shimu na dvarai, please listen to my word. Meaning, even though God's wrath flared against Miriam and Aaron, nevertheless, says the Sifsei Chachamim, Hashem said na, which is a lashon of bakasha, and He spoke to them benachas. Why? Because had He spoken to them bekas, His words would not have been listened to. So what do we see from here? Even the Ribono Shel Olam needs to speak benachas, and even Aaron and Miriam would not have been able to accept and integrate and be makabel what the Ribono Shel Olam said had the Ribono Shel Olam not spoke benachas. Amazing. Aaron and Miriam would not have been able to follow Hashem's directive if the Ribono Shel Olam did not speak benachas. Now it's interesting. The Ramban then says, Uv'chaleis, and at all times. What does that mean at all times? For example, we say B'mem Adlikin Friday night, we say Shlosh Dvarim Tzarech Adam Loim B'Sach Beis Erev Shabbos Yisartem Rav Delikas Haner. The Gemara says V'Tzarech Loimer B'Nichusa. You have to say it gently, meaning B'chaleis means even Erev Shabbos, and it's a few minutes to candlelighting, and you have about 3 hours left of things to do, and tensions are high, and people are very anxious, and you could, if someone poured gasoline in the room, everything would explode. Even so, even at a time like that, one has to train themselves to speak benachas. By the way, the Gra at the end of the Iggeres Gra quoted the statement of Chazal, and it comes from the Reishis Chachma. It's called in the Reishis Chachma that when a person leaves this world, they ask him, did you learn Torah? Were you involved in Gemilas Chasadim? Did you proclaim God as your king in the morning and the evening? Were you mamlech your friend benachas ruach? So here, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter would say, to be mamlech your friend benachas ruach is a very difficult avoida. Okay. Now, I want to share with you a very interesting thing. What does the Ramban mean? Tisnaheg tamid, which, by the way, the Ramban is saying you got a game plan. You can't wake up during the Super Bowl and decide, okay, should we run the ball? Should we throw the ball? Should we spread it out? Should we play action? No, you got to be prepared for the eventuality. That means the person has to game plan. How am I going to speak in this circumstance? How am I going to react under this circumstance? Otherwise, if you wait until it happens, it's not going to be a favorable outcome. Now, what would you think the Ramban means when he says, Tisnaheg tamid ledaber kol dvarecha benachas? I think most would translate, nachas would mean peacefully, gently, with equanimity. Meaning, the Ramban's coming to tell us, uvazet tinotzel min hakas, that through this method you will be saved from anger, and therefore the Ramban is saying, don't speak your words in an agitated way, in a way that shows a disruption of equanimity, but benachas, nachas means roiga. Roiga means peaceful. Don't speak with agitation, speak peacefully. However, that is not what the Ramban means. When the Ramban says the word nachas, it doesn't mean what you think the word nachas means. Nachas means gently. No, that's not what the Ramban is referring to. Because the Ramban is saying that by doing so, you will accustom yourself not to get angry. The Ramban says, the Ramban is not saying train yourself not to get angry. Right? The Ramban doesn't say, Tisnahig tamid shaloi lechais. The Ramban is not saying train yourself not to get angry and therefore train yourself to speak in a non-angry kind of way. He says train yourself to speak benachas. He's giving you an approach not to come to anger. He's giving you a manner of speech that if you accustom yourself in this manner of speech, you will not come to anger. What's the eitzah? The eitzah is speak benachas. But that doesn't make any sense. If the Ramban is trying to give you an approach not to get angry, he's saying, oh, here's an approach not to get angry. Speak in a not angry way. Shkayach, but I'm angry. So what is the mahalach? What is the approach? Ramban is saying that if you do X, you won't come to anger. He's not saying speak in a non-angry kind of way so you don't come to anger, because that's like saying, here, this is how you don't get angry. Don't get angry. That's like saying, al tikais teheragua. Don't get angry. We're trying to learn an approach, how you don't come to anger. The word nachas does not mean peacefully or gently. Nachas means lowly. Low, namuch. The word nachas means namuch, softly. The Ramban's eitzah is not speak gently and peacefully. The Ramban's eitzah is speak softly. If somebody calls out at you, somebody snaps at you, speak softly. Because the Ramban says later on, V'im yikra'echa ish al ta'aneu b'kol ram rak benachas. The Ramban says if somebody calls out to you, don't answer him in kind, but instead answer him not b'kol ram, answer him benachas. So obviously the word benachas means the opposite of kol ram. Right? The Ramban says, "V'im yikra'echa ish al tahaneu b'kol ram rak benachas." So that means nachas is the antithesis of kol ram. So the Ramban is saying, accustom yourself to speak lowly. If you speak softly, if you accustom yourself to speak in a softer tone, that will train you and that will help you overcome anger. And I have an edition of the Iggeres Ramban called Oyal Yaakov, that's with the parish of Rav Zev Pinchas Mendelovsky, and he brings a number of rayos that the word nachas does not mean peacefully. The word nachas means in a soft voice. For example, in Masechta Megillah, Parag Gimel Siman Aleph, the Rosh says that nowadays the reason why the Baal Koirei lanes and the one who gets the Aliyah doesn't lane is because not to embarrass somebody who doesn't know how to lane. However, even the person who gets the Aliyah should read along benachas. Benachas doesn't mean peacefully, it means quietly. The Shulchan Aruch says the oila has to read benachas that his ear can't hear. So that means benachas clearly means belachash, not loudly. By the way, the Tosfos writes on Daf Ches that during Kriyas HaTorah, you're not allowed to learn b'kol ram, only benachas. Nachas doesn't mean peacefully, it means quietly. The Shulchan Aruch says in Archaim Siman Nun Tes, Berchas Yoitzer and Arvis, you say it along with the Shliach Tzibur, benachas, not to disturb other people. Or, finally, if you look in Koheles, Divrei Chachamim, the Nachas Nishmaim. Nachas doesn't mean peacefully, it means softly. And the opposite is Mizakas Moisha B'Ksim, as opposed to the screaming of the fools. So the opposite of Ze'aka is Nachas. Nachas does not mean Roiga, peacefully. Nachas means softly. And if one trains themselves to speak softly, then that will help a person overcome anger, because if somebody snaps at you and you're accustomed to speaking softly, that helps a person calm himself down and diffuse the situation. Rabbi Sai, have a great day.
Wait, what time is the shir tomorrow?
Tomorrow 1 o'clock, yes.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.